Picture this: mountains of trash piling higher every single day, oceans clogged with plastic, and landfills spreading like open wounds across our planet. Now imagine, instead of burying or burning all this waste, we threw it into one of Earth's deadliest natural furnaces, a volcano. With its glowing rivers of molten rock and its terrifying, endless heat, a volcano looks like the perfect garbage disposal system. But is it really that simple? Could these fiery pits of destruction truly swallow all of humanity's waste and erase it forever? Or would we be setting off a chain reaction of disasters even more terrifying than our current trash problem? This is What If Beyond, and today we're asking, what if we threw all our trash into volcanoes? Every year, humanity generates an unimaginable amount of garbage. In the United States alone, that number is over 250 million tons annually. Expand that across the globe, and we're talking about billions of tons of waste. Plastic bottles, electronic scraps, toxic chemicals, leftover food, metals, even dangerous radioactive materials. All of it adds up to a growing crisis. The idea of dumping it into a volcano almost feels genius. After all, lava burns at temperatures above 200 degrees Celsius to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt steel, vaporize plastic, and reduce almost anything organic into ash in a matter of seconds. To the untrained eye, volcanoes seem like nature's perfect garbage incinerators. But here's the problems. Volcanoes aren't bottomless pits designed for our convenience. They are unpredictable, unstable, and explosively dangerous. Before we could even think about feeding them our trash, we'd face enormous challenges. First, there's the issue of location. Out of Earth's 500 active volcanoes, most of them are nowhere near where humans actually live. That means transporting billions of tons of waste thousands of miles across oceans and continents just to reach them. And think about the cost: fleets of ships, trucks, and planes burning fossil fuels, releasing more greenhouse gases, and making climate change even worse. But let's imagine we somehow overcome that obstacle. We find ourselves standing at the rim of an active volcano, truckloads of garbage ready to be dumped inside. Before we tip even one bag over the edge, there's another critical detail. Not all volcanoes behave the same way. Some erupt violently with explosive force, while others flow more gently. Choosing the wrong volcano could turn this wild idea into a death sentence. So the real question is, which kind of volcano would actually work for our garbage disposal fantasy? And what would happen if we tried finding the right volcano? So, let's say humanity decides to go all in on this crazy plan. Before tossing a single bag of trash into fiery magma, we'd need to answer one big question. What kind of volcano could even handle it? Out of the 500 potentially active volcanoes worldwide, only a small fraction are even worth considering. You see, volcanoes aren't all the same. Some erupt violently with devastating power, while others slowly ooze lava, like an open wound on Earth's surface. For our purposes, we'd be hunting for a very specific type, the shield volcano. Shield volcanoes are massive, broad mountains with gently sloping sides, built up by centuries of slow lava flows. Unlike their explosive cousins, these volcanoes can sometimes form lava lakes, vast, bubbling pools of molten rock that look like nature's cauldrons. These lakes are about as close to a giant trash incinerator as Earth provides. In theory, you could drive up to the rim and toss garbage directly into the lava, watching it bubble, smoke, and vanish beneath the glowing surface. It almost feels too good to be true, and that's because it is. Most volcanoes we're familiar with are actually stratovolcanoes, towering, cone-shaped giants like Mount Fuji in Japan or Mount St. Helens in the United States. These are not calm or forgiving. Instead, they are notorious for their violent, explosive eruptions. Stratovolcanoes erupt because pressure builds up beneath their surface, a mix of hot magma gases and superheated steam trapped underground. Now imagine tossing thousands of tons of random trash into that pressure cooker. The sudden cooling effect from solid waste hitting hot magma could destabilize the delicate balance, triggering steam explosions and violent eruptions. In short, throwing trash into a stratovolcano would be less like using a garbage can and more like lighting the fuse of a bomb. Even if we found one of those rare shield volcanoes with a lava lake, the challenges wouldn't stop there. Getting close enough to dump trash would be a death wish. The rim of a volcano is one of the most dangerous environments on Earth. Poisonous gases seep from the ground, capable of knocking you unconscious in seconds. Molten rock splatters unpredictably, and projectiles of superheated stone can be hurled hundreds of meters into the air. One wrong step, and you're sliding into the very pit you came to use. Imagine being the waste collector assigned to volcano duty. It wouldn't take long to question your career choices. And then there's history to consider. Back in 2002, a group of Ethiopian researchers actually tried tossing a bag of trash, just 30 kilograms, into a lava lake. The result, a violent mini explosion, hurling molten rock and gases into the air. If a single bag of garbage caused that much chaos, imagine the chain reaction from an entire nation's waste. Instead of solving our trash problem, we might be triggering volcanic disasters powerful enough to threaten nearby cities and ecosystems. Suddenly, landfills don't sound so bad anymore. So even if we track down the right volcano, we're still faced with unstable reactions and dangerous logistics. And we haven't even touched on what happens if the garbage actually stays inside the volcano. Would it really burn away forever? Or would it leave behind toxic scars that could haunt us for centuries? What happens to the trash inside the volcano? All right, so let's imagine we've somehow done the impossible. Against all odds, we've found a rare shield volcano with a lava lake, built the infrastructure to haul millions of tons of garbage to its rim, and dumped it inside. What happens next? Well, the first thing to know is that lava isn't the magical eraser we wish it was. While it's true that lava can reach blistering temperatures above 200 degrees Celsius, not everything melts or disappears completely when it touches molten rock. In fact, the results might be more dangerous than we ever expected. Take plastics, for example. We already know that burning plastics in regular incinerators releases toxic chemicals like dioxins, hydrochloric acid, and carbon monoxide. Now imagine throwing thousands of tons of plastic waste into a volcano without any kind of filtration system. The gases produced would be released directly into the atmosphere, carried by the wind, and inhaled by anyone downwind. Instead of solving pollution, we'd be trading one kind for another, this time on a much larger and more poisonous scale. And plastics aren't even the worst case scenario. What about hazardous waste? Batteries, chemicals, pesticides, or even nuclear materials? These don't simply melt away in lava. Some of them could react violently, while others might leave behind toxic residues mixed into the molten rock. Eventually, when the volcano erupts naturally, which it eventually will, all that garbage could be spewed back out into the surrounding environment. Imagine a volcanic eruption, but instead of just ash and lava, it's laced with poisonous metals, radioactive particles, and microplastics. The fallout wouldn't just cover the local landscape. Depending on the size of the eruption, winds could carry that toxic ash across entire continents. Even everyday trash wouldn't behave the way we think. Organic matter, like food waste, would vaporize quickly, creating bursts of steam and gas that could destabilize the lava lake. Metals might melt partially, but they could also solidify into strange clumps that sink and interfere with the natural movement of magma. The truth is, Volcanoes are delicate systems, even if they don't look like it. Dumping random, unpredictable materials into them could alter their internal pressure and trigger explosive chain reactions. And let's not forget the air pollution. If you've ever seen volcanic eruptions on the news, you know they release enormous plumes of ash and sulfur dioxide into the sky. Now, add garbage smoke to that mix. Every truckload of trash would create clouds of toxins without any filters or scrubbing systems to contain them. Unlike controlled incineration plants, volcanoes don't come with safety features. They're raw, brutal, and completely unfiltered. The result? A cocktail of pollution released straight into the atmosphere, accelerating global warming and damaging ecosystems far beyond the volcano itself. So, while on the surface it might look like the garbage is disappearing into the fiery pit, the reality is much darker. It doesn't just vanish. Instead, it transforms into toxic gases, unstable materials, and potentially deadly fallout. In other words, throwing trash into a volcano doesn't erase our waste. It simply reshapes the problem into something even harder to control. And that leads us to an even bigger issue: the environmental cost of making this plan a reality. The environmental fallout. At this point, it's clear that tossing our trash into volcanoes wouldn't be the magical solution we hoped for. But let's step back and think bigger. What would the global environmental impact look like if humanity actually tried this on a large scale? Well, for starters, the air would become significantly more toxic. Every truckload of waste dumped into a volcano would produce clouds of poisonous gases. Unlike modern incinerators that use scrubbers and filters to reduce emissions, volcanoes have no safety nets. That means every molecule of carbon monoxide, dioxin, and hydrochloric acid released from burning plastics and chemicals would go directly into the sky. Over time, this wouldn't just pollute local areas. It could disrupt entire weather systems and accelerate climate change. And the problem doesn't stop at the air. Consider the surrounding environment. Lava lakes and volcanic vents are already unstable. Adding tons of garbage could contaminate the magma itself with heavy metals and other toxins. When the volcano eventually erupts, and remember, every volcano will erupt sooner or later, those contaminants would be blasted out into the world. Toxic ash could blanket forests, farmland, and cities hundreds of kilometers away. Rivers and lakes could be poisoned, ecosystems destroyed, and human health put at risk. The fallout wouldn't stay contained to the region around the volcano. Winds could spread it globally. Much like volcanic ash from massive eruptions in the past, has circled the planet for months. Then there's the carbon footprint. Transporting billions of tons of garbage to remote volcanoes would take fleets of ships, trains, and trucks. The fuel burned in this process would release staggering amounts of greenhouse gases. In fact, the emissions from simply hauling trash to volcanoes could end up being far worse than the emissions we already create from landfills and incinerators. So instead of reducing pollution, we'd actually be multiplying it, just shifting it into different forms. Another issue is safety for the workers themselves. Approaching an active volcano is one of the most dangerous things a human can do. Poisonous gases like sulfur dioxide can suffocate you within minutes. Lava splatters unpredictably, and collapsing ground near the rim can send vehicles tumbling into fiery pits. No matter how advanced our technology becomes, the human and economic cost of using volcanoes as garbage dumps would be astronomical. One accident could mean entire teams of workers lost, not to mention the catastrophic damage to nearby communities if things went wrong. And finally, there's the bigger picture, our relationship with waste itself. Throwing trash into volcanoes doesn't solve the root problem. It just hides it at a terrible cost. Humanity's waste crisis is tied to overproduction, overconsumption, and poor recycling systems. By pretending a volcano can erase our mistakes, we'd only delay the inevitable need to change our habits. And by the time the environmental consequences caught up with us, it might already be too late to reverse the damage. So, while the image of a volcano swallowing our garbage sounds cinematic and satisfying, the reality is far from it. What looks like a solution could quickly spiral into an ecological nightmare, one that threatens not just the land around volcanoes, but the stability of our entire planet. Which raises the final question: if volcanoes can't solve our trash problem, what alternatives do we actually have? Conclusion and alternatives. So, after all this, the idea of dumping our trash into volcanoes might sound less like a solution and more like a dangerous fantasy. Sure, it's tempting to imagine lava lakes acting like giant shredders, swallowing every plastic bottle and rusted appliance we no longer need. But the reality is clear: volcanoes are unpredictable, unstable, and brutally unforgiving. Instead of solving our waste problem, they'd create new ones. Toxic gases in the air, poisoned ecosystems, violent explosions, and massive carbon emissions from transporting trash across the globe. In short, volcanoes are nature's fury, not nature's garbage cans. If we really want to tackle Earth's growing trash crisis, the answer isn't in using destructive forces of nature. It's in building smarter, cleaner systems here at home. Controlled waste to energy incinerators already exist, and unlike volcanoes, they come with advanced filters to capture toxic emissions. These facilities don't just destroy trash, they convert it into usable electricity and heat. Imagine powering entire neighborhoods with the same energy created by burning yesterday's garbage. That's a far more efficient and sustainable use of our resources than tossing everything into a volcano. Recycling is another piece of the puzzle. Right now, much of the world's recycling systems are broken or underfunded. Plastics that could be reused often end up in landfills or the ocean. By investing in stronger recycling infrastructure, we can reduce the sheer amount of waste we create in the first place. The less trash we produce, the less we have to figure out how to get rid of. Composting organic waste, redesigning packaging, and creating biodegradable materials are all steps toward reducing the mountain of garbage that grows higher every year. Of course, some people have suggested even wilder ideas, like shooting trash into space. At first, this might sound as crazy as throwing it into a volcano. But technically, it could work, if it weren't for the massive costs and the terrifying risk of rockets exploding mid-launch, scattering garbage back into the atmosphere. Still, it shows just how desperate humanity is becoming to solve its waste crisis. We're looking for miracle solutions in space and lava, when the real answers are much simpler: reduce, reuse, recycle, and innovate. In the end, volcanoes remind us of two things: their raw power and our tendency to look for shortcuts. But the truth is, there are no shortcuts when it comes to saving our planet. If we keep producing mountains of garbage, there will never be enough volcanoes, rockets, or landfills to make it disappear. The real solution lies in us, in the choices we make, the technologies we build, and the systems we improve. So, the next time someone suggests tossing trash into a volcano, you'll know the truth. It wouldn't erase the problem. It would only make it worse. But it does leave us with an interesting thought. If volcanoes and even space can't save us from our waste, then what futuristic solution might? Could we one day invent technology that actually breaks down trash at the molecular level, leaving no pollution behind at all? Well, that's a question for another What If Beyond.